What if the doctors told you that you would never walk, talk, or even be able to eat on your own? And instead of accepting that, you said, no, I'm going to run out of this hospital at the end of this rehab. My guest today had a severe brain injury at just 14 years of age, and he's going to tell his story in depth about that journey and about a snowboarding accident and how it impacted him, but how he refused to lose, refused to give up. And then he applied those same lessons to a real estate career and has been thriving ever since. Nick Prefontaine is my guest today, and he is just a pleasure. And he's also incredibly inspirational because you will hear the genuine nature in his voice where failure was never an option. Not somebody just saying, well, failure wasn't an option. With this dude, failure wasn't an option. I had the pleasure of speaking with Nick Prefontaine, and Nick is a speaker, a founder, and the CEO of Common Goal, a company that inspires and leads motivated people to their aspirational goals. And their mission is to provide clients with the support and the tools to achieve their limitless potential. But long before founding this company, at 14 years of age, Nick suffered a life-threatening snowboarding accident where he was told he would never walk, talk, or eat on his own. He made it his personal goal that he would not just walk, but run out of that hospital. And in applying his quote-unquote S.T.E.P system that he'll tell us about, he did just that. He's an Amazon best-selling author of The New Rules of Real Estate and is the co-host of Not Just a Transactional podcast that explores the many creative options available for buying or selling a home. And we'll talk more about that too. So with that introduction, Nick, welcome to the ThriveMore podcast.
Roger, I'm so honored to be here. I'm excited.
This is going to be fun. We haven't talked a lot about real estate on this podcast, but before we get there, I would love for you to take us back to when you were 14 years of age and you are snowboarding down the mountain. And then what happens next?
Sure. So that day, that fateful day back when I was in 8th grade, so I was at ski club with my friends, and my friends and I had brought our snowboard gear onto the bus to get ready so we wouldn't miss a precious moment once we got to the mountain. And once we got to the mountain, the rest of the class migrated inside to get ready, but not us. We wanted to get all the runs in we could. So we headed right for the chairlift. And Roger, on the ride up, we noticed that people were wiping out everywhere because it had been raining earlier in the day.
Yeah.
Got to the top, as I mentioned, it wasn't our first trip down the mountain. So we were excited to be there. And actually the chairlift went right over the terrain park where all of the jumps were. So as soon as I saw it, the biggest jump in the terrain park, I was like, oh yeah, that's what I'm hitting. Absolutely. That has my name all over it. Yeah. So I got to the top, buckled into my snowboard, took a breath of that crisp winter air, and confidently charged towards that jump with all my speed. And then going out to the jump, I caught the edge of my snowboard on the snow going up the jump, and that kind of threw me off balance. That was the last thing that I remember.
Oh, wow. Did you wake up in the hospital then?
Well, I pieced together based on eyewitness accounts, like friends of mine who were there that actually saw it happen, and my family and everyone. I pieced together the rest of the events that happened after that. So that was the last thing that I remember.
Wow.
I later learned that I landed on my head. I wasn't wearing a helmet. Later, I learned that the only protection that my head had, believe it or not, was a pair of goggles that I had. And at the time, I had some big, thick goggles with a lot of padding. So they were the only thing that braced my fall. I learned that they not only braced my fall initially, as I continued to roll down the mountain and continue to hit my head, with each impact, they moved to cushion each hit against the ice. So in essence, I partly credit my goggles for that day for saving my life. And I've reached out to the company several times, I'll get in touch with you eventually, but haven't been able to connect with anyone live there yet. Then they wanted to, because of the severity.
And Nick, what was the specific injury, if you can share?
Sure. It was a traumatic brain injury. So I went off a jump, probably 20 or 30 feet up, and cleared the landing and landed right on my head. And then they wanted to bring in a helicopter to rush me to the hospital because of the severity of my injury. And they weren't able to do that because it was too windy. So they had to send in an ambulance. Out of all the paramedics in the county, there was only one who could intubate on the spot. And I needed that to be able to breathe. And he was one of the paramedics that showed up at the mountain that day. And that was the second thing. The third thing, once I got to the intensive care unit, and I was out. I was resting in a coma, unable to communicate with anyone. And my parents were the only ones that were allowed in my room at that time. There were friends and family, all other extended family that wanted to see me. My parents were the only ones in there with me when I was in the coma. And the doctors came into my room. They, no fault of their own. They were just doing their job. And they went to share what was going on with me, what my prognosis was and everything. And right when they started to share in front of me, my mom stopped them. And she said, no, not in front of him. Because she understood that even though I was in a coma, I was still taking in information. So she made them step outside. And then once they were outside my room, that's where they shared that with my parents, that he was in a snowboarding accident, went off a jump, landed on his head. He's in a coma. So because of the force that I hit, there was swelling in my brain that was so much that if it went up more, so if I woke up and panicked and who are you people? What am I doing here? How did I get here? The swelling would go up and I would die. So they had to partially induce me in a coma. And they said, based on the impact alone, I probably would have been out for only 7 to 10 days, or only. I would have been out for 7 to 10 days just based on that impact. So they had to partially induce me into a coma. And then once outside my room, that's where they shared the news, my prognosis with my parents. They said he's been in an accident. We're going to have to partially induce him into a coma. We don't even know how long he's going to be in the coma or if he's even going to come out. However, if he does come out, there's a good chance that he's probably not going to be able to walk, talk, or eat on his own ever again.
Oh my gosh.
And because my mom, and up until a few weeks ago, I used to say my parents, but I was on my dad's show and he told me, hey, I don't mean to interrupt, but it was your mom that did that. I'll take the credit, but it was your mom that did that. So my mom, and I'll give credit where credit is due. Because none of that information got through to me, whether I was out, like asleep, unconscious or not. It allowed me to treat it like any other situation. So they say that I was in a coma for 3 weeks. I really don't remember a month. So there are videos of myself in the hospital where I have my eyes open in the intensive care unit. I have my eyes open. I'm looking around. I have no recollection of that whatsoever.
Wow.
When I went back, just to do a quick aside here, when I went back a few years after to take part in a groundbreaking ceremony, and it was one of the first events that I spoke at after my accident, I went out to the ICU for the first time where I was. And I walked around the light, like as soon as I got on the floor, I was walking around and I was like, my God, this place looks so familiar. Like everything, the nurses' faces and the doctors' faces, everything looked so familiar. However, I didn't consciously remember it. It was because I was just coming off all those drugs from being in my coma. So a month after my accident, I was transported to a rehab hospital in Boston, and that's where I began my journey of having to learn how to walk, talk, and eat again. And Roger, I can remember this, and this was before I could talk, before I could walk, anything. I remember overhearing my parents talking to my doctors and therapists, and they were saying, all right, what do we have to do to make sure Nick makes a full recovery? I heard in the back of my head, no, you're going to run out. So then running out of the hospital became my common goal that we're striving for every week. And when we met with them, the doctors every week to see, all right, what are we doing this week to make sure Nick reaches his common goal of running out of the hospital? So it was along this time that I unknowingly utilized this system to not only make a full recovery, but run out of the hospital. And that's the S.T.E.P system. S.T.E.P stands for support, trust, energy, and persistence. So support, you have to make sure that you have the support of your family and friends around you. And this is going to have you falling back on relationships that you built prior to your setback. T is trust. Trust that once you take your first step, your next step is always going to be available to you. Follow it. And this also is about trusting your calling that you have within inside of yourself. And different people will call it different things. Your subconscious, your unconscious, God, the universe. Everyone has that voice in their head, and a lot of people, the majority of people, will discount it and say, "No, that's not realistic. I'm not gonna do that. No one would ever listen to me," or they'll just rationalize it away. But it's so important that you're able to trust that calling that you have inside yourself. And I'll circle back later in the story to see how, by listening to that inner voice, allow me to follow this calling of telling my story from stage and developing the S.T.E.P system and being able to help other individuals. I'll get to that a little later.
Yeah, sure.
E is energy. Maintaining your energy allows your body's natural ability to be able to heal itself. And we're all born with that natural ability. However, medication and drugs will get in the way of that. And the way that I can introduce this is as I shared, when I was in my coma, there were a lot of drugs and things pumped into me to help keep me alive. I needed that. I needed modern medicine to do that. However, once I came out of the coma, this story sticks out in my mind, and I've been sharing it often that, again, no fault of the hospital, the doctors and the nurses of theirs. They were just doing their job and what was easiest for them, managing hundreds of patients. They were early in my recovery prior to being cleared to walk. Again, I was still in a wheelchair. I wasn't cleared to walk. I'd get up in the middle of the night and used to go to the bathroom. And I would have my dad or my grandfather or an uncle stay with me during the night. My mom would stay with me during the day. And I think it was my grandfather at the time. He was staying with me in a cot next to my bed. I couldn't get his attention. So what I did was I lowered the rail of my bed and I kind of hobbled myself to the bathroom. The hospital found out and they freaked out. They like lost it. Like, he can't do that because that's liability for them. Yeah. Like, we're gonna give him this many cc's of this drug and this many cc's of this drug. And because I had an advocate, which was my mom, which was my parents, they were being my advocate at the time. They said, no, you don't have to drug him. Just tell him, no, you're not supposed to do that. And I feel like I don't want to, this is the word that's coming to mind. They get away with it by just drugging people because a lot of people are numb that come into that, have an experience like that, a family member going through an experience, and no, if the doctors say that, then that's what we got to do. However, my parents understood that they had to get those drugs out of my system. And then finally, P is persistence. So once you've taken your first step, keep getting up every day and taking your next step, no matter how small. And this is something that I live to this day, that when you're at the beginning of a setback or a challenge or trauma or tragedy, you have to take a little bit of action every day. I'm not talking 12 or 13-hour days here. I'm just saying every day, by taking a little bit of action every day, whether it's just working on something for 15, 20 minutes, a half an hour, an hour, you're building an unstoppable momentum it really is unstoppable, and it's going to carry you through. You're going to be able to keep going when it does get more difficult. And that's something that I've used to start Common Goal. I've used to start this company. I've used several times throughout my life. So if you fast forward to less than 60 days later, I realized my goal of being able to run out of the hospital. And after that, Roger, it wasn't like my work was done. I had to continue to go to outpatient therapy for another 6 months, along with being tutored all summer long, 5 days a week, in order to continue on to high school with the rest of my classmates. And
let's not forget, you were in 8th grade when this happened. Like, 8th grade is hard enough as it is. Like, just being in 8th grade is hard enough as it is. And then add this into it. Wow.
Yeah. So, like, I'll give you an idea. When I came back, I ran out of the hospital on April 24th. So I missed all that time between February 5th and April 24th. And the hospital said to me, "Oh, don't worry, take your time, go to your therapies, and you can just do 8th grade again next year." And I didn't want to do that. So I would make myself go in to school, and I wasn't able to be where my classmates were in the classes. However, I would get tutored for 3 hours a day in the morning. Then I would have lunch with my classmates, and that was my favorite part of the day, being able to hang out with my friends and have lunch. And then after that, my mom would pick me up and we go to outpatient therapy. And I would have to do that 5 days a week until the end of the year. And I walked with them at 8th grade graduation. However, that was one of the first places that I spoke at as well. So it wasn't like my work was done. I was like, yeah, excited and everything, but then I had to like go to work pretty much for the rest of the summer. And it's a little surreal to me. And this is the thing that I wanted to get to and I wanted to talk about specifically. It's a little surreal to me that only 18 months after having finished therapy, outpatient therapy from my snowboarding accident and being in a coma, I got my start in real estate, and that was door knocking pre-foreclosure doors. So all pre-foreclosure means is notice of default. So homeowners that have received a notice of default letter from the bank, meaning that they have missed a few payments, or let's be candid, it was 2005, 2006.
Sure.
They had missed 10 to 12 payments. The bank still hadn't foreclosed. So I get a list, and really, this is interesting because I never consulted anyone on this. They gave me a list, like my dad and his company gave me a list, or told me where I could go to find these. And then they gave me, if no one's home, you leave this. And what you're trying to do is schedule appointments for the following week for the investor to meet with them about buying their home. Mm-hmm. So in my mind, I was like, okay, well, I don't want to go to the beautiful suburban areas where there are only 1 or 2 homes in the town. I want to go to the cities, the areas of cities where they're literally right next door, and I can hit the most amount of doors in a day so I can get the most amount of reps in so I can get better faster. So I went to areas of cities, not so prime areas of cities to buy real estate. And we actually owned real estate in those cities for years after I finished knocking doors. So I did that throughout the rest of high school. And then,
all right, but if I can just,
I'll take a breath there and take a
I love it.
Soapbox.
No, Nick, it's awesome. And I mean, everything just one, thanks for sharing your story and overcoming the accident. And it's just inspiring. I think what you've shared in the S.T.E.P process, the S.T.E.P process, 100% applies to business. I love your nugget about, you said it's just about taking an action, small action steps. This was in your recovery, of course, for the physical accident, but all of that applies to business. Take another step today, move forward. Yes, that next step's going to be a little scary, but probably a little less scary than the first step. The first one's always the hardest. And I just love the analogies here, but I don't want to overlook the fact you're in this life-threatening accident, and then 18 months later, that puts you, if my math's right, around 15 years old, maybe 14, 15 years old.
16. So I
16.
I could knock on doors. However, I couldn't ride with friends in the car. However, I could knock on over 50 doors a day.
Yeah. So as a 16-year-old, one, where did you find I don't know if the word is gumption or just confidence to just walk up to doors and say, hey, I know you're behind on your mortgage payments. I may have a solution for you at 16 years of age.
So it's like my accident. When I got in my accident and I just recovered, and like I just got up every day and did the best I could, and I kept getting better, and it led me to where I still do that to this day. I still try to get better every day.
Yeah.
However, that's just something that I did. And looking back on it, people ask me, how'd you do it? And I was like, oh, I don't know. Anyone else would do it in the same situation. People tell me they're like, no, Nick. No, they wouldn't. Everyone else wouldn't do that. And to me, that I just can't fathom that. So I was literally, I was reading, I remember the book. I was reading that summer or the summer after my accident. So actually like a couple summers after my accident, I was reading, and that was the Cash Flow Quadrant by Robert Kawasaki. And I grew up in a family real estate business. My dad was he was a builder, then a realtor, had his own brokerage. He sold that, and he was an investor, and he went in between a bunch of different real estate things. So I grew up in real estate. My parents that's what they were always doing. And it never occurred to me until I read that book, Cash Flow Quadrant, that, hey, I kind of want in. I kind of want to start helping. Like, what can I do? And right around that time, when I approached them, they're like, oh, actually, now that you mention it, we're looking for someone to be a bird dog, basically, and go and knock on doors. So I was like, all right, great. And they just told me, here's where you go to find them. You go to a website, this is where you find them. Here's the leave behind. Here's the file on your computer. You can print them out. Oh, and a script. So they gave me a script. This is what you say. So I don't know. I was just naive, I guess.
Sometimes that's good. That's good.
I just didn't. And it wasn't, I don't want to mix words here. It wasn't successful at first when I was trying. I get a lot of doors slammed in my face. Sure. However, I learned a lot that I wanted to get. This is where I developed the fact that I wanted to get the most amount of reps in, because you don't get better by doing like 1 or 2 a day and then not doing it for another week, because I had to go to school during the weeks, unfortunately. Yeah. So I needed to get those reps in. And then after doing it for a few months, my dad flew my cousin Mike and I out to California to shadow the #1 guy in the country that was having success with these noticeable doors. Once I saw his approach and how much it differed from mine, I immediately changed my approach. And there was no tact involved with what I was doing. I'd knock on the door like loud, and then they'd open the door, and I'd read the script, and that's why I get a lot of doors slammed in my face. And I saw Colin do it when we were out in California, and he had so much, everything was rehearsed. He would go, I mean, not in a bad way, not in a negative way. He was really good at his craft. So I saw the success that he was having and how it differed from mine, and like what to incorporate. And then I made those changes, and that's when I started seeing success.
I love it. Hey, everyone. As you know, I don't have any advertisements nor sponsorships on this podcast. My only ask of you, the listener, is that you share this podcast with someone that you know, a friend, a family member, a coworker, or a colleague who may benefit from this information, may benefit from today's guest, from the value that they're sharing with the audience, with you, the listener. When you share this podcast and our audience grows, it allows me to book more and more guests who have a great message, great nuggets of wisdom that you can benefit from. And again, your network can benefit from. So please, right now, push that share button, send it to somebody that you care about, and let's get back to the interview. You hit on a couple other gems, and that it's number of reps. And so many people will try something once, twice, and go, well, this doesn't work. When you need to try it 100 times, 200 times, 300 times before you ever determine whether this is going to work or not. And usually, like you found out, it's just tweaking it'll work. You just have to tweak your process and tweak your approach. And obviously you did, and then we're very successful. Can I ask, how was your physical health? So this is 18 months post-accident, and you're going door to door as a 16-year-old. How was your physical health holding up as you're, knocking on 50 doors a day?
Like after going to all my outpatient therapy, they clear me. And then I just never like to just settle at that. So I started going to a physical therapist on my own to get stronger and stronger. And then even after that was done, I started lifting around this same time, like lifting weights. And I don't know, I just kept trying to get better. And if you kind of fast forward a little bit, after I graduated high school when I was 19, I got my real estate license in, March of 2008. It was a terrific time to get your real estate license. March of 2008. However, I didn't know any different. So to me, it was people would complain about, the market used to be so good. And I was like, what are you talking about? The market's the market. And so I was able to survive and be successful and support myself, which was like a real goal that I strove for at the beginning. And I was able to do that. And then in 2014, my dad approached me and he said that he was starting to buy properties non-conventionally, not using big down payments of his own money or big investor down payments. And he was getting all these properties. He needed help with marketing them. And I was like, no, I got my own thing going on here. I'm successful doing my own thing. I'm all set. And luckily he asked me a few times. So I finally said yes and figured, I can do it right alongside being a realtor. So over the course of a year, a little more than a year, like 13 months, my income as a realtor was the majority of my income, and I was only making like pennies with him. And then it shifted over the course of a year. In January 2016, it didn't even make sense for me to keep my real estate license anymore because the marketing of the properties grew to now I got to help all these buyers that are responding to all the ads on the properties. And then working with him full time, I developed the buyer process, the particular process that we have to put our buyers through in order to give them the best chance of being successful in getting their own loan. And this is so interesting because there are only probably 10% of rent home buyers, like nationally, that are able to follow through and get their own loan, where our success rate is the inverse of that. We're seeing 90%, up to 90% of our rent home buyers will be able to go forward and get their own loan. Why is that? It's because of the altruistic business model that we have. We want to see everyone succeed. So the person we buy the property from, we want them to succeed. We want the buyers to succeed, and then we want to succeed. We find that win-win-win transactions it's really the best way to go. And
so Nick, is the model is actually, if I understand this correctly, then you'll go out and find a home and purchase it in a non-conventional way, which means you don't go get a mortgage for it. You purchase it in a non-conventional way. And then you market that property to somebody that may need to rent first, and then later accumulate enough equity from a portion of the rent to then have somewhat of a down payment on it? Kind of explain that business model if you could.
Yeah, it's actually a little bit differently than that. So that's the misperception in the market, and why I think the success rate of rent to own is so low. And that people think, oh, okay, well, I don't have to do a down payment. I'm just renting the home and a portion of my rent is going towards a down payment. Where we kind of flip that on its head. So all of our homes do require a down payment, anywhere from 3 to 10%. That's usually prior, or that always is prior. Their down payment's always prior to moving into the property. And then if it's on the lower end of that spectrum, 3 to 10%, then we'd like to see them come up with a plan to get their down payment up to closer to, if not over 10%. By the time they do come to the end of their lease. We find that by doing this, that gives them the best chance of being able to be successful and get their own loan. And I think right now is a perfect time to, I'm not even sure you knew this about me, Roger. So all throughout that, and helping my dad with the whole rent own, the buyers and everything, I developed a voice issue. And I developed a voice issue back in 2012, and I looked everywhere for almost a year, and I couldn't figure out what was going on. No one could tell me what was going on. They all said, "Oh, you're fine." They checked all my levels and doctors, everything like that, and they said I was fine. They couldn't, and I knew something wasn't right though. Yeah. So I finally wound up in a voice specialist office in Boston in August of 2013. And he walked into the room, heard me speak, and right away, nonchalantly goes, "Oh, that? Yeah, we deal with that all the time. We'll get you fixed in no time. Go see the front desk and schedule a Botox injection in a couple weeks." And that's where I started my journey of getting Botox injections in my throat in conjunction with their higher level voice therapists to get my voice back. So not only did I have to learn how to talk again after my snowboarding accident and being in a coma, I had to get my voice back again. And that took the better part 8 years, maybe even a little longer than that. And really, that was kind of the impetus, or my realization that, okay, you have something here that you have to be sharing with others and helping others that are going through trauma, life challenge, or adversity get through to the other side and thrive with the rest of their lives. And that's because when I was growing up, I just did it. So I didn't think it was a big deal. However, having to overcome my voice issue 8 or 9 years, it really tested me. And it tested the S.T.E.P system, where I found out, okay, looking back on it, it wasn't conscious at the time. Looking back on it, I was like, all right, so there was a particular process that I did. And it actually took until early 2022, my mentor, Trisha, pulling it out of me, where she asked me, she goes, "All right, so you recovered from your snowboarding accident and you ran out of the hospital. How did you do it?" And I said, "I don't know. I just got up and just kept working every day." And she's like, "No, that's not good enough." And she asked me 7 or 8 layers deep, to a point where, Roger, I was frustrated with her. And I was like, I don't know. Stop asking me. And I'm really glad she put me through that exercise, because without her, I wouldn't have developed the S.T.E.P system. And really, she was the one that helped me write a keynote that I've now delivered, it has to be over 10 times now, to various brain injury associations and other organizations that work with people that are going through adversity, like a 45 to 60 minute keynote. Prior to her, I would only, the most I'd speak is 20 or 25 minutes. I really, I have her to credit for all that, for pulling it out of me, the S.T.E.P system.
I would just love your input on this, because I have a 23-year-old and a 20-year-old. And I was just talking to my dad yesterday, in fact, about young people and, Gen Z and their ability or lack thereof to get into homeownership. Just because the market has, gone crazy, even, we're supposedly we're in a recession, and yet, home prices are steady or still growing. Mortgage, the interest rates as we record this podcast are high as they've been in decades. What are you seeing? And, you're very, very, very close to this industry. You're right in the thick of it. What are you seeing as the potential solution for this, if there is one? Because from what I've read, there's Blackstone and KKR, massive PE companies buying up residential real estate, turning it into rentals, and then you have entire, at least in where I live down in the Southeast, entire brand new gorgeous neighborhoods being built just to be rented, never to be sold, just to be rented. What do you see as the path forward as home prices keep rising, interest rates are high, and a 27-year-old, 30-year-old is trying to buy a home?
Sure. So I'm actually going through this right now because I'm in the process of, and I'd recommend this for your kids as well. The fact is that regardless of the market, and everyone always talks about the market, and you probably can relate because you asked the question. You don't know how many times I get this question. So Nick, you're real estate. What do you think the market's gonna do? Like, sure. I don't know. I have no idea what the market's gonna do. However, what I do know is there's always going to be homeowners who, for whatever reason, they're not in an ideal world and they're not able to put their home. Everyone, like, the standard is if you want to sell your home, you hire a realtor, put it on the market, and get top dollar. That's the standard. However, there are people who need our help, and that's who we're seeking out. And we're in the process of doing mailings to several surrounding towns looking for like free and clear homes, that people that want to get top dollar. And there's for estate planning purposes that people don't want or need all the money right now. So we're starting to do targeted mailings, but in any market, regardless of hot, and we're not even in a like screaming hot market right now. However, even in a screaming hot market, there are homeowners that for whatever reason, for one reason or the other, it might not just be price, they just can't sell. It's tied up in the courts. It's going through probate. It's going through a divorce. So there's always going to be sellers out there to help. And we just try to seek them out and to help them and give them a solution. That's all we can do.
So it sounds like the way you're looking at it is buyers are going to have to be more creative. A young buyer, any buyer really, if they don't have that sizable down payment and they're going to have to get more creative, just as the sellers are going to have to get more creative, and those two meet up, and now you've got a transaction.
Absolutely. And it's not even just me, my general nature being in the real estate business, like the creative real estate business. I could very easily get a loan. I could probably like walk into a bank and get a loan today. I just, knowing what I know, I don't want to.
Sure.
I just don't want to. So I'm looking for a property that I can close on, either close on subject to someone's existing loan, and help them out of a situation, or buy a home with owner financing and help them out of a situation.
I've recently learned about subject to, right? So, and this is, I don't know if all the listeners are familiar with this because I wasn't. And when I learned about it, it was pretty eye-opening, especially in this market. So if I understand this, and please correct me, if you have a subject to purchase, you are basically, if somebody has a 4% interest rate, and now it's 8 or 9 or whatever it is now today, you can assume that loan. So the purchase is subject to me assuming your loan at the 4%. And so is that correct?
Yeah, a little different. The word assume, just because that's another thing out there, like assumable mortgages is like, like you don't Uh, subject to is like a different thing altogether. It's
What is that? What is subject to
closing,
then?
closing. All right, buying someone's home subject to their existing financing. So their loan stays in place, and we've had several deals over the year where we've done this. Their loan stays in place. However, we're still buying the home. So ownership goes to us, like our name is on the title. However, their mortgage stays in place. So you would, in a situation like that, you would never have to get a loan.
And that mortgage staying in place, which is, I think this is what I was reading. You get their interest rate, obviously the balance, if there's 27 years left on it, whatever it is, and you're making the payments, or the
Yeah.
buyer, but they
Yep.
make the
Yeah,
payments, but the
you
loan.
can do it for your own house, and that's what I'm trying to do. In addition to us, so as a family business, like my dad and I, and then my brother-in-law and my sister, we're all in the boat right now of buying property. Like
Mhm.
now is an amazing time, like it was back in 2013, 2014, 2015, to buy homes creatively. And when we're buying homes creatively, so there's a few different ways we buy, like subject to someone's existing financing and we'll actually close on it. Another way is a lease purchase.
Mhm.
So we'll agree to buy the home. It's basically a delayed cash sale. We'll take over all maintenance responsibility and upkeep of the home over the term. The lease, like a 4 or 5 year lease, and
Mhm.
then on or before that date, we'll cash them out, and then they can move on. So that's
Yep.
another way they would buy. And then if someone doesn't have any debt on the property, we can buy with owner financing,
Yeah.
making principal only payments. And for those, we can pay a little bit of a premium.
Yeah. Yeah. Super cool.
That's just glazing over
Yeah.
some of the ways that we buy.
I literally, as late as today, I mean, or as recent as today, I should say, was in a conversation with someone around the real estate market, and we're talking specifically about the commercial real estate market. But man, if I could do it all over again, I would go heavy, heavy, heavy into real estate, either residential or commercial. Just they're not making any more of it, right? They're not making any more dirt,
Exactly. Yeah, exactly.
and it is crazy. I always ask my guests some of the same questions to end the interview, and one of them is, because I'm an avid reader. I love that you read Cash Flow Quadrant. It amazes me you read that at 16 years of age. That's outstanding. Most kids are watching MTV. You're reading Robert Kiyosaki. Um, what is a book that you've read? Because I love to give my guests to give book recommendations to the listeners so that they can augment their learning and hopefully take a no pun intended, a page out of your book. So what is a book that you've read that when you set it down, Nick, you thought, man, that changes the way I look at something here? Whether that was a self-help book, a business book, anything. What book would you recommend to the listeners that really helped change your perspective?
What really set me on this whole path, and I would say when I say this whole path, I mean healing. So healing myself from and using the step system unknowingly to do that. And once I did it for the second time, I was like, I have something here that I have to share with the world. Um, and it set me on the path. I think I read it in 2013 or 14. And since then, I've gone back and read it cover to cover like 4 or 5 times. It really is absolutely amazing. That's Frequency. It's called Frequency by Penny Pierce, and
Okay.
it's all about your personal vibration. And it's not a light read.
Yeah.
It's very deep. Like if you're serious about this, about improving yourself, it really that's what I have the credit really with. That's like one of the books that kind of changed my trajectory, if you will.
Mhm.
Um, and really made a difference for me, I feel like.
Love that. Thank you for the recommendation. And I don't think anybody would be listening to this podcast if they weren't trying to get 1% better every day. That's you'd tune into some other podcast besides this one if you weren't trying to improve. And I really appreciate that you mentioned that you've gone back and read it cover to cover 4 to 5 times. I am such an advocate of Find your great books, your reference materials, the ones that really resonate with you, and then study them. Read them again and again. You don't have to read them cover to cover at the same sitting, but take a chapter and digest it and think about it, and then go back and reread it, because that's when the real nuggets come out. That first time through is the first time through, and it's the second, third, and fourth times where you start to pick up things that are just gems that you may have missed the first time. So I appreciate you said that. So a couple last questions here. One, you've overcome, literally, we always say, people have trauma in their life and they can use that trauma to fuel their success in the future. You literally overcame, physical trauma and have been very successful and continue to climb and climb and climb. If we fast forward to the end of your life and we're at your funeral and someone is reading your eulogy, but they're only allowed three descriptors. They're allowed three descriptors to describe the life that you lived. What three words do you hope they choose that describes the life you lived?
All right. There are two words here that are similar.
Mm-hmm.
So even though it's four, I'm going to share it.
Please.
He followed his calling. He followed his calling.
I love that.
Because I've always, and if we have time, I just want to share this. So I've always, since my accident, I've always had this voice in the back of my head that's always telling me that no matter how successful I'm being, sales, real estate, whatever, it's always been there. And it's always been like, yeah, this is great, but what you really need to be doing is helping others, helping individuals that are going through their own trauma or life challenge or adversity, get through to the other side and to be able to thrive with the rest of their life. And speaking and telling your story from stage. Someone saw me speak in 2019, September 2019, at one of our events, and it was our last live event before the pause for COVID. And she approached me after, and she said, "I'm not trying to steal you from your dad. However, if you ever want to really fine-tune your message and tweak it so it has maximum impact and able to affect and help the most amount of people, I can make a few introductions for you and set you on the right course." And I always hung on to her card. In fact, I still have it in my drawer. I waited until May of 2021, and I finally reached out to her. Since I made that phone call to her, and she introduced me to her mentor, which has become my mentor, Trisha Brooke, who I've mentioned a few times during this interview, there has been no voice. And to me, that's evidence that I'm doing exactly what I was put on the cert to do.
I'm really glad you shared that. Wow. Thank you. Thank you.
So that related to what they would say, follow his calling.
Yeah. I love asking that question because to me, those three words or that phrase, whatever, however anybody answers, because there's no right answer. It's just it's your answer. That's what we should spend the majority of our life pursuing, right? If there's three specific words, if there's, four words that make up a phrase, that's where we should put 90% of our energy and not all the other BS that, gets us weighed down and we spin around the axle on stuff that doesn't matter. Those four words are what matter. That's what matters in your life, and that's why I just love that. That question was asked of me a while back, and it made me stop and take pause and go, okay, I think I said husband, father, leader. Okay, but it doesn't relate to one of those three things. I probably shouldn't be putting a lot of effort towards it, and so I love that question. And then second to last question would be, if I were to give you a magic wand and you could wave that magic wand tonight, and we wake up tomorrow and you could make one significant change to the world. The world is different, according to Nick, because he waved this magic wand and wished one thing for the world to be different in a certain way. How would the world be different tomorrow when we wake up, according to Nick?
People would stop downing themselves, and they would realize how big the gift inside of them is to share with the world. So fear and doubt, if we were able to get rid of that, I can't even imagine. I can't even fathom how much the world would evolve. and where we'd all be in 10 years if that happened.
Yeah. Everything we want is on the other side of fear. Everything we want. Yeah. Nick, a super important question is, how could people get in touch with you, follow you? I'm sure there's going to be people that hear this that are going to want to follow you and be part of your story, or even learn from you. How would they do that?
Sure. So first, if anything, I know we just touched on it a little bit, but if anything, what I mentioned about real estate and how we buy and sell creatively, and then help our associates intern all across the country do the same thing. If any of that is of interest to anyone listening, they can check out our website, smartrealestatecoach.com. And if they scroll down a little bit, they can get registered for a free master's class. I believe, don't quote me on this, if it's longer, but I think it's only 20 or 30 minutes. And by the end of that, they'll know. It's not a great fit for everyone, but they'll know if it resonates with them, like what to do to take their next step. And then if what I shared about the STEP system was only a 10,000 foot view of the STEP system, within each letter, there are the little things in each letter, like I touched on. Within support is you have to have an advocate. That's one of the things I teach and talk about in my keynote and podcast appearances like this. If you're interested in that, you can go and download the whole STEP system for free today. And that's nickprefontaine.com/step. And that's going to teach you all about support, trust, energy, and persistence.
Okay. We'll actually we'll put that in the show notes too. We'll put both those websites in the show notes so that people can just click from right there. Yeah. Sir, you are incredibly inspirational, and I love your just keep moving forward attitude, and it resonates. You talked about frequency and vibration. You have this incredible resilient vibration that is just obvious. So thank you so much for being on the ThriveMore show. I appreciate you.
You're welcome, and thank you for having me.
You bet. Thank you for tuning in to the ThriveMore podcast. Don't forget to take a look at the show notes for any of the resources that we mentioned during the podcast. And if you haven't already, be sure to hit the subscribe button and turn on your notifications so you have access to the latest and the greatest. You can connect with me on any of the socials at Real Roger Martin. And be sure to check out our website, ThriveMoreBrands.com. There you'll find information on the brands we support and information on franchising. Thanks again for tuning in.